Welcome to the Issaquah Senior Center Learning Lab series. Thank you for joining us today. Our goal of this series is to provide real-time interactive experiences with experts who share their knowledge of how to navigate during these challenging times. Today, Diane Gillespie will speak on strategies for increasing natural sleep in troubling times. Diane Gillespie retired as Emerita Professor, Community Psychology at the University of Washington Bothell. She has used her background as an educational psychologist to advocate for natural sleep, a project that emerged out of her own sleep challenges. So welcome, Diane. Take it away.
Thank you so much. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my PowerPoint up. Is that okay? Okay. So now what I have to do is make sure. Okay, now let me get that out of the way and let me do the slideshow from the start. Oh, there's my grandson. How's that? So
that's great.
Everybody see? Oh, great. Well, it's just a joy to be here with you today. I hope you're well, all things considered. And today I want to discuss for about 20-25 minutes some new research on sleep, the importance of sleep, and then methods for increasing natural sleep. So I think we all know that sleep is connected to well-being. Today I'm really going to talk about, sort of our own abilities to empower ourselves to sleep in a natural and even abundant way. But we all know that we're affected by the culture that we sleep in, including, our partner, our family, our coworkers, if we're still around, even in a place where people are working. And so the kinds of expectations that people have about sleep can really affect what we think about it. So I have prepared a handout that Catherine will send to everybody, or maybe she already did, I'm not sure, so that you can find any of the information I'll talk about in this presentation on that resource sheet. And this is probably the only learning lab you'll be in where if you fall asleep during this presentation, it will be a great honor to the presenter. So before I put you to sleep, I want to give you a little history of how, yeah, let me see here. Oh, what's going on? Why isn't it going forward? Let me see. There we go. I don't know why that's working. So I slept pretty well till I was in my 50s, occasionally having to count sheep. And when I started to have trouble, I remember this very distinctly because the song Take Sominex Tonight, Safe and Restful, Sleep, 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 about 20 years ago, you might remember that little jingle. So I went to the pharmacist and asked him, I was thinking about Sominex, and he said, no, just get Benadryl, because what's in Benadryl is really in all over-the-counter sleep medications, or most of them. And it's what's called an anticholinergic. So I did. I just bought Benadryl. It seemed to work. And then when I started traveling internationally, I got a prescription for Ambien. And that really seemed to help. I didn't take it all the time. I didn't take Benadryl all the time. But the Ambien seemed to help with jet lag, and then times when I was, kind of stressed. But that prescription was short-lived. My doctor from Group Health would no longer prescribe it. And in fact, she started telling me medication is now the last resort. Thus began my sleep project. So increasingly, I was having trouble getting back to sleep, given several nightly trips to the bathroom. So other people have difficulty falling asleep or certainly people who are around noise a lot have, get awakened by even neighborhood noise. So in 2015, I really was jolted awake by sleep and by sleep medication as I was really starting the whole sleep project. The Adult Changes in Thought study was published in 2015. And this was a study that was done at my own university, UW, and my own healthcare center, Group Health. And I just want to read to you the results of that study, because this has become it's actually become very famous, and it's still going on. Essentially, when the researchers examined medication use of 3,500 people over 65, they found that people who used anticholinergic drugs like Benadryl were more likely to have developed dementia than those who didn't use them. Moreover, dementia risk increased along with cumulative dose, which is why the study was so powerful. Taking an anticholinergic for the equivalent of 3 years or more was associated with a 54% higher dementia risk than taking the same dose for 3 months or less. Now, several months ago, and I think it was last July, you'll find it on the resource sheet, a new study from England with a much larger sample size found that prescriptions for anticholinergic drugs increased dementia risk by 50%. At the same time, NPR just recently reported, I think in December, on a study that showed that deep natural sleep cleanses the brains of toxins that are thought to lead to Alzheimer's. So there's this really new emphasis in the research now on dementia and the importance of natural sleep. Now, my mother died of Alzheimer's. So you can, it really all this research has really gotten my attention. So my advocacy now for natural sleep, some people call me an evangelical sleep person, is really the result of these experiences, my own inability to sleep, my own use of medication, and then when I didn't want to use medication, what I started doing was creating stories in my head that would lead me back to sleep in the middle of the night. And I was in a writing group, and so I shared one of them. I just told my writing partners this story, and they say, "Oh, Diane, you have to write that up." So that began my narrative sleep project, really that first story that I wrote for them. But now in the meantime, as I'm doing this, I'm still going back into the new literature on sleep. And I find that the Institute of Medicine's 2006 warning intensified. It was an unmet public health problem in sleep disorders and sleep deprivation in 2006. And by 2017, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention declares insufficient sleep a public health epidemic. So in 2016, people like Arianna Huffington left her post at the Huffington Post because she collapsed at work from a lack of sleep. So she started researching sleep, and sort of as a public figure, wrote a book called The Sleep Revolution. And in that book, she really talks about the way in which, especially American culture, really valorizes people who don't sleep. I know you've heard people say, "I'll sleep when I'm dead." Well, actually, you may be sleeping sooner than you think if you don't sleep. And so, in addition to her work, Matthew Walker, She does a kind of both medical and cultural analysis of sleep, arguing for natural sleep. So Matthew Walker's a neuroscientist at Berkeley, and he wrote the book Why We Sleep. And he claims, both of them claim, this is really a crisis. It's going to have long-term effect, an effect on people who aren't getting enough sleep. And so they really emphasize the dangers of also sleep medication. So I just thought you would be interested to know that even though more and more people are aware of these warnings about sleep medication, the amount of medication Americans are taking is really shocked me. $41 billion, and this is like Tylenol PM, Advil PM. These are all basically the anticholinergic part of the drug is what's working to induce sleep. So Matthew Walker in his book says, sleeping pills do not provide natural sleep. They can damage health and increase the risk of life-threatening diseases. So it's not just sleeplessness or deprivation that's causing dementia and, threatening life diseases, but it's also the medication. So at the start of my project, the first thing I did, because of my study in narrative psychology, is I looked at the stories that I was telling myself when I would awaken in the middle of the night. And I found that that's a lot of especially women my age, have this difficulty. It's like don't have trouble going to sleep, but by the third time you wake up, very difficult to go back to sleep. So I started looking at the stories I was telling myself when I couldn't get back to sleep, and they were stories of woe and desperation. So I some of you may read Sandy Bell Lundy in our Seattle Times paper. She says, I forgot to mail my parcel and I didn't finish the laundry and I still need to renew my license. And then you lecture yourself, forget it, Susan, there's nothing you can do about it now. Tomorrow is another day. There goes her eyes again. Oh, I forgot to mail my parcel and I didn't finish. In other words, the tape just keeps replaying over and over again. So many people, it turns out, tells these kinds of, they've told me they tell these kinds of stories when they awaken. And of course, what's really hard now is that with all this attention on sleep, people are also adding to the anxieties of their everyday life the new research on sleep, which also makes you anxious, right? Oh, I should be getting back to sleep. I know I need my sleep. So I thought maybe you would be interested to see, now that you know about the pharmacological sort of dangers of sleep medication, I thought you'd be interested to know that the nonpharmacological industry has built up with technology, and I thought you might just be interested in some of the ways in which it has tried to come to our rescue. Now, I'm going to talk about these kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but I want you to know they all have, lots of fans, and I think it's, none of them use medication, which is what the idea is, but it's kind of fun to see. It's now $1 billion industry, by the way. So this is your 8 sleep tracker, $330, and so you have your smartphone. Well, now you can have a smart bed. So this tracks everything you do when you sleep, and it gives you a readout in the morning about how you've slept. There is some research that shows actually this does increase people's anxiety, although you need to know some people. I have a friend who swears by his not this particular one, but his tracker, and every morning he gets up and he looks at how he slept the night before. So for some people, people who maybe track their steps all day long so this is available. I'm sure there are knockoffs of this that are cheaper too. And these are molecule sheets. They're with cotton that keeps you kind of cool during the evening, because that's one of the things we're going to see the National Sleep Foundation recommends, is that you stay cool so at night when you sleep. And so these are breathable, and the king size are $219. This is the Dow Sleep Light, $59. And by the way, I have all these on my handout. And so this emits a light that goes up very slowly up to the ceiling, and then it comes back down, and it goes, I think it's like 7 seconds, all the way up and all the way down. And you look at this light until you fall asleep. It's $59. Now, bright light therapy, this is, there are lots of different kinds. This is recommended because especially in places like Seattle, where we don't get much sun in the winter, you need bright light in the morning. I actually use one of these. Need bright light in the morning to get your circadian rhythm in sync, so that you're producing melatonin toward the evening. And so this being out, either outside in bright light, it's also really important as an antidote, some people think, for depression. So this is just an example of a bright light therapy light. And you sit in the light for about 20 minutes. You can be doing other things while you do that. Now, this is the wireless sound soother headband, $99.99. And it plays music. Maybe it would read a boring novel that would help you get back to sleep. The idea is that if you have a partner, you don't bother the partner, and that you don't have to fiddle with anything. You can just leave it on your head in the middle of all through the night. Now, this is one that is really interesting. This is called the Dreampad, and it plays music only you can hear through bone conduction. Now, I have no idea how this works, but I thought it was $160, and you lie on it, and somehow the music comes into the bones in the back of your head, so that you don't bother anybody else while you're sleeping, and you can hear, it'll play what you want it to play, relaxing music. Well, this is the weighted blanket cure-all. You may have heard of these. This is the original one, $250. They weigh between 15 and 30 pounds. It's generally being used, actually, not only for sleep, anxiety around sleep, but also for Asperger's, people who have, I'm blanking on the word, for anxiety disorders. I'll come back to it and think of it. Autism, sorry. Autism. So many of my friends like this that I finally bought one. I didn't get the $250 one. And I would say generally, in my experience, that I think overall, it's probably helped some, but anyway, you can ask questions about it if you want. Lots of people swear by it. So now this is the Somnox Robotic Pillow. This is $600. Excludes shipping. It does everything. You can sleep with it like a stuffed animal. It plays music. It somehow tracks your sleep. So it's kind of the newest hip, I guess, if you're really into sleep, monitoring your sleep. So my narrative approach, I'm going to just go back if I can. No, I'm going to go back. Whoops, I don't know how to go back. This is really funny. Okay, there, let's go back to. So my narrative approach is really much cheaper. And I'll talk about how you can use some, what I call cognitive behavior therapy approaches, all of which are free. They're non-pharmacological approaches that involve you retraining yourself so that you can calm yourself and go back to sleep. And meditative practices are really central to this. I think the more people people have a meditative practice, this helps them use that at times when they're stressed, they're sleep stressed. So I want to be really clear. I'm not a medical or technical sleep expert, but I have studied and researched narrative psychology and its constructive practices for better understanding and enriching our lives. And I brought this knowledge and experience to creating sort of non-pharmacological, non-technical approaches to sleep. So for those of you who might be interested, narrative psychology is a branch of cognitive psychology that argues that the content and structure of the stories we tell ourselves have real connections to our behaviors, including what we can even imagine for our behavior, for what its consequences will be, and even for how we're going to change behavior or others. So before we get into some narrative practice and other cognitive behavior therapeutic strategies, I just want to review the basics from the National Sleep Foundation. These are really important. First of all, there's a new category. These are the new guidelines. And you'll notice, I'm assuming most of us are older adults, that the new sleep range is but for 7 to 8 hours. And actually that was kind of a relief for me because the 8 hour, window is a lot as you get older, I think. So if you're getting 7 hours of sleep, the National Sleep Foundation says, don't worry. It doesn't matter when you're getting it as long as you're getting 7 hours of sleep. You can see the other age ranges. And as some of you may know, our teenagers are having real issues with sleep because of their devices, their technological devices, which actually have been shown to, technological devices have a light that keeps the body from producing melatonin. So people really struggle with sleep when they are on devices, especially late at night. So these are some basic recommendations, again, from the National Sleep Foundation. They're now saying actually to avoid blue artificial light for 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. An hour at least, and for the entire night. So you want to make sure that your room is totally darkened. You want to invest in that to make sure you have a dark room. And you can also get eye covers that are very comfortable if you're not able to darken the room for whatever reasons. You can get eye covers that you can research and find one that you might find comfortable. Exercise during the day is really important, and I think almost all of us have had that experience of really sleeping well after we've had a hike or we've done, whatever exercise we do. If we go to, I don't know whether you have exercises, Catherine, at Issaquah at the senior center. So when we put exercise in our day, and especially they say in the morning for some reason, but anytime exercise is important. And then to avoid heavy meals and alcohol before bedtime. And the 6 is also getting a lot of attention that you need to keep the same sleep hours, even on the weekend, so that you go to bed at the same time and you wake up at the same time. Even if you don't sleep, you keep the same hours. Over time, you'll get your body built up. The idea is to those hours. So before I turn to the cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia strategies, why don't I find out from you experiences you've had with sleep, worries that you might have. And now you heard me say I'm not a doctor. I will say right off the bat that if you're having, serious sleep problems, you need to see a doctor, and you need to know that the new machines for apnea are really cool. So if you think you're having really troublesome sleep problems, I would definitely go, and UW Medicine has great sleep clinic, by the way. Be sure you go and see a sleep specialist, because if you have apnea, and they have these new, they're not these big clunky machines that they once were, they're very comfortable, and it just changes your, if you have apnea and you wear one of these machines at night, it really helps. So questions that you might have or experiences you'd like to share.
Yes, my name is Reva Turtel.
Okay, go ahead, Reva. Thank you.
And I have a question about melatonin. I take 5 milligrams. Is that something to be concerned about?
So, you know, there's not a lot of research on melatonin, but what I found is that it's not a sleep aid. So that's an interesting, so it doesn't have the effects of the anticholinergic drugs I was talking about. The danger is that your body will stop producing it. You want your body to produce natural melatonin. So 5 milligrams is a lot. Yeah. If you can take it down to 1 to 3, I don't think it's a problem. And if you aren't doing it every night, but if
I take it every night. I've done it for a long time.
You know, I have not seen any research that, the only research is you don't want your body to stop making it.
Oh, okay. So I've taken it for, a long time.
Are you taking it every night?
I do. And my doctor's aware of it.
Yeah, okay.
She's negative about medicines, and she never said anything about this.
No, it doesn't. No, I think just the less you can, just try experimenting to see if you can do 3, break 1 in half and see what happens. But if it, 5, my niece was taking 10 milligrams and she's young, and I just, you want to make sure that if you can get by with less, that's better.
Okay, my doctor is very aware of it, and she's very negative on all kinds of, pills and stuff. So
good.
I would think that she would let me know if there was a problem.
Yeah, she would. Yeah.
So I'm curious about the keeping the same sleep hours even on weekends. So what does that do?
So essentially what happens is your body needs the routine. And so when you jerk it around, going, like if you stay, if you get up at 4:30 in the morning and then you go to bed at 8:30, and then the next night you go to bed at 10:30. So the idea is that you want your body, because sleep is actually a physiological process that you build up to all during the day. So you want the conditions for that build up to sleep, which is one thing we have no control over. If you watch I have a YouTube from Matthew Walker on the resource sheet. It's only 20 minutes. By the way, he's gotten criticism because he does make people anxious about sleep. So be aware of that. But he's saying that, this is something we can't will. This is one thing that's never changed in our evolutionary history, is this sort of, and your body has to have this sort of routinization for it to go to sleep. So the idea is that you try to make it as routine as you can. That's a great question.
Well, I go to bed usually at the same time, but on the weekends, I kind of stay in bed. I'm not necessarily sleeping or not sleeping, it's just kind of because I can,
Yes, I do. Well, I remember.
So. Yeah, you remember. Yeah. Okay, well, that's it's really interesting. Yeah, I'll have to try that more.
Yeah. So, and when I first started struggling, my group health doctor said, Diane, go to bed at 11, get up at 7. Because I'm not a late night person. So that kind of surprised me. So anyway, I think it doesn't matter what the 8 or 7 hours are. What matters is that they're regular as much as possible. So why don't we, other burning questions? Why don't we go on to the cognitive behavior therapy approaches? And again, all of these are on your handout. So these are all self-initiated. Again, at the bottom, you'll see, you can also go to cognitive behavior therapists for sleep. They're doctors and psychologists trained who are licensed in sleep therapy. But these are things you can do, I think, on your own, and they're really fun to experiment with. So the first, their goal of all of these that you initiate yourself is to modify your sleep environment and then replace beliefs that you have that lead to sleep deprivation or reaching for that pill. So one of the first ones is meditation, and I have on the resource sheet the sort of leading links to all kinds of meditation, both guided meditation or meditation that you can practice on your own. Again, people who meditate before going, swear by it, who meditate before going to bed. You can also use meditation when you wake up in the middle of the night. So you can also turn on meditation tapes on your iPhone or your phones. Just remember that when you turn on a light, the research says light is the enemy of sleep. So that's the downside, but people turn their phones over. And there are just all kinds, as you can imagine. Some of them are for money. Some of them, you have to pay for a subscription. Others you can find tons for free. Another strategy that people have found.
So Diane?
Yeah.
Maddie has a question. So
sure.
Maddie,
Oh,
what's your question? Maddie, did you have your hand up? Oh, maybe not. Okay.
Just jump in I'll go through these and then we'll come back and you can ask more questions. So
Okay.
trauma tapping is a strategy where it's an anxiety reduction strategy where you tap on the meridian points in your body. And I have the link. It's very easy to learn, and you can do this before you go to sleep. You can do it when you wake up in the middle of the night. And the idea is that it reduces anxiety. And then there's something called emotional freedom techniques where you actually tap and you say things that allow you also to get rid of maybe some toxic beliefs you have about yourself and sleep, and then replace those with more nurturing thoughts. But again, these are, you can explore these. Then there's this really fun, I don't know what to call it. It's autonomous sensory meridian response, ASMR. And millions of people, I didn't know what this was when I started, and someone came up and whispered it in my ear and said, you need to learn about ASMR. So when I went to the computer to learn about it, I was a little shocked. But these are, it's a relaxing, often sedative sensation that begins on the scalp, and it kind of moves down the body, and it with kind of tingly sensation. So you might have had it, the woman in a video that maybe we could put that on the resource sheet. Catherine says that when you were little and someone touched your hair, like your mother, touched your hair in a certain way and your scalp kind of tingled. So the idea is that when you have that response, it's so relaxing. So a lot of people turn on a YouTube in the middle of the night and listen to, and usually it's people whispering. And as the person who told me about it said, if you see cleavage, it's not ASMR. So just be aware that there are other kinds of whispering women out there. So ASMR is not actually sexualized. And so people, they whisper and they'll click things and they kind of play with hairbrushes. So the idea is that any of these little soft noises will trigger this sort of tingling response. They crinkle paper and they spray things, and millions of people, and I've got links to, there's even an ASMR university. I was so surprised. So those are all available again on your resource sheet. So what I encourage first, before you turn on lights, are image or metaphor reframing. So this is a strategy where you're working with, maybe beginning to work with some of the stories that you tell yourself in the middle of the night. But if you think about images we have of people being distressed in the middle of the night because they can't get back to sleep, often they say, I was a ship tossed at sea. And if you notice, if you stay in that metaphor, you will be, right? Your whole body will be scared and fearful and physically challenged. So one of the things you can do is take a metaphor like that and reframe it. So here I go. The ship leaves the storm. The sails come up, the water is calm, and the ship is going to sail into a harbor where the sun is setting against a golden sky. The boat, the ship, gently rocking. The anchor drops. Okay, do you get the, you've taken a troubling, anxious image or metaphor, and you've turned it into a quiet, relaxing image that actually can take you right back to sleep. So the next strategy that lots of people use is journaling. And so if you find yourself, like in the Sandy Lundy cartoon, thinking about all the things you have to do the next day, one of the things you can get in the habit of doing is keeping a journal by your bedside. And in that journal, just keep track of all the things that you have to do the next day that you might worry about. And before you go to sleep, figure out how you're going to address them. It can be, you know, like a week out, it can be the next day, it can be in the morning when you get up, but you have a strategy for each thing that might keep you awake. That way, when you wake up and you start to think about the laundry, you've got it already taken care of. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to do that when I get home from work. Not the end of the world. So that everything that might keep you awake, you've actually journaled it out before you go to bed. And finally, the last strategy is what I call narrative reframing. And I have a book of stories that I use. And I thought if we have time, I would read you one. And this is one that's free on the Medium website, and the link to it is in the resource sheet. I have two stories that you can get to on Medium that would be free. So maybe what I could do, since you're probably kind of awake, is maybe get you to sit up a little straighter in your chair. And I'm going to see if I can put you to sleep. So if you could, let's maybe do a quick body scan before the story, just to get ourselves in a meditative mood. And I'll start with your toes. Just if you could close your eyes, if you feel comfortable closing your eyes. And start with your toes, and I want you to imagine that you're pushing them down into warm, soft sand. Which relaxes your ankle. And then your leg. Relax the bottom of your legs all the way up to your knees. Feel your knees soften. And now relax to your hips. Your legs are floating and your hips are softening into the chair. Your lower back relaxes. All the way up to your neck. Through your spine, all the way up to your neck, and your arms are hanging. Your fingers softening. Relax your jaw. Your eye sockets. Your scalp. Stay relaxed. Imagine that you are walking briskly through a city that you love, taking in the storefronts, walking through galleries and small parks, and enjoying waterfront views. As you begin to feel the strain in your legs from so much walking, you notice the air turning colder and the sky filling with dark clouds. You pull your scarf tighter around your neck and decide to return to your houseboat, a whimsical place that you rented for a weekend getaway. As you turn the corner toward the dock in the houseboat, big drops of cold rain fall. You rush to unlock the door in time to save yourself from getting drenched. Inside, you feel the warmth hit you as you hang your damp jacket on the hook to dry. You take off your shoes and put on warm, thick socks. Raindrops patter softly on the roof. In the tiny kitchen, you turn on the stove to heat up the teapot for a cup of chamomile. Gazing out the windows, you watch the rain falling like pieces of grain pelting the lake. Small waves rock the houseboat. A novel and magazines wait by an overstuffed chair in front of a picture window with a view of the tree-lined lake. In the distance, seagulls croon. You take your cup of chamomile, sit in the chair, pull down the warm Afghan, and put your feet on the ottoman, slowly turning the pages of a magazine. You sip your tea. The rocking movement of the boat lulls you. The magazine slides down in your lap. Eyes closed, you give way to the softness of the cushions, the warmth of the blanket, and lean back, feeling your neck, back, and legs relax. Nothing else matters now. Nothing except the sound of raindrops and gentle waves lapping against the houseboat, all pulling you into sleep. So hopefully you felt a little nappy there. So briefly, how to use the stories, and you'll find my website, I have a video on how to work with stories that you create. You can use some of the ones I've done and modify them if that's useful. But the idea is that you find a story that you really like and you learn the sequence of events during the day so that when you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't have to turn on a light. You already have a movie that you can run in your head. And so what you do first when you find a story that you like is you modify it. So like if you don't like chamomile tea, you don't want to have that detail in the story, right? You know, or if you don't like houseboats, that story may not work, right? Or rocking makes you nauseous. You wouldn't want to use that story. So you find a story you like, but you get the idea of the stories because you can also create your own. But you get the sequence of events down that will lead you to sleep, and you go through them very, very slowly. And the idea is that you memorize the sequence because you don't want the laundry popping in the middle of the story. So if you know what's going to happen, and there are very simple sequences, and you stay in it, you don't let these intrusive thoughts come in from the outside. It's almost like I do volunteer work in Africa, and I sleep under a mosquito net. And so the story actually prevents the mosquitoes in a way, the things that would buzz in my ear that would worry me, you know, when I'm trying to get up. So it's really important that you create details that are relaxing for you. And so that you go through it during the day, and then you go, you know, you take your time going through the stories. And sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 stories to get back to sleep. And sometimes, you know, like there's like this houseboat story, it might work for me for about a week, and then, well, I want another story, you know, so I'll work with another story. So maybe I'll stop here. I know we're almost out of time. I'd love to be able to, Catherine, can I show them my book, or would that be inappropriate? Okay. So that's my website. Whoa, what happened? I lost it. Oh, well, there we are.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to hold it up.
Oh, I can't.
I
can. Sorry. Here. Ah, yes. I can. Stories for Getting Back to Sleep. And it's a fundraiser. All the profits from this book and all my work on sleep goes to a really cool nonprofit in West Africa called Tostan, which is empowering women across West Africa, especially famous for ending female genital cutting and early child marriage. So they work on women's well-being, in West Africa. And what I have found when I started looking is that there really wasn't a lot on sleep in women. I mean, there's some research on women and having more trouble with sleep, but there weren't strategies. And so there were a lot of sort of male voices out there, which fine, I'm not against, if they work, that's great. But I thought it would be interesting to try to work from a woman's, you know, a kind of woman's perspective on the issue. So, and I have an audio, it's available on Amazon with a Audible version. So if you like how I read that, I have 16 stories in the book. So questions?
So are there any questions? And Jessica, Deborah, and Barb, you guys are on mute, so feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jessica. Thanks for this information. And where would we get the book?
You'll get it on the resource sheet.
Okay.
You'll get the link on the resource sheet.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
So the resource sheets are going to be being mailed to us? Is that
Email.
that? Okay.
No, I'm gonna email them to you.
Good now. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's good because you can just go to the links and you can try the tapping and you can try the ASMR and all the different. It's fun to experiment. I've just had a great time experimenting with all of this, and it's increased my sleep, which is all good.
Yeah, I end up not sleeping, and I usually end up getting up and journaling and quiet time for about an hour and a half before I go back to sleep. So I would be trying some of these other techniques. I'd rather be sleeping, but that's what I do instead.
Yeah, as long as you're getting 7 or 8 hours. I don't think that's, you know, if you get 4 hours before it and 4 hours after. But the problem is it means you're in bed a lot.
Yeah.
Or around sleep a lot, you know.
Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah.
There was information about sleep that I had read, and it's been some time, and you know how things change, but that if you're awake and you can't get back to sleep for, let's say, 20 minutes or so, that rather than staying in bed, because then you're imprinting that the bed isn't just for sleeping, but to get up and do what this woman just shared.
yes, actually.
You know, and then going back to bed when you found yourself getting tired again.
That's a cognitive behavior strategy that's still very viable. Yes,
Okay.
thank you for sharing that.
Where I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to mention, I speak from someone who has had to get up at once a night, that's all, since I can remember as a teenager to use the bathroom. And I didn't want to have to turn on lights.
Right.
So I always make sure that I have a strategically placed night light. And I don't ever allow myself to look directly at it.
Great.
I have to go, so I'm going to say goodbye and thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks for being here.
And it's because I don't want to wake myself up totally.
Right.
And so that's just another thing. It's a preemptive or you know, planned way to address an issue. And that way I just shuffle myself in and then I don't have to worry about exposing myself to bright lights.
That's really great because as we get older, there's also dangers if you don't have a light of falling.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if you're like me, I go more than once. But anyway, you've got to make sure you have a clear path because falling is a big issue. And it's also a big issue with sleep medication.
Right. It's
for elderly people.
Yeah, it's a pre-planning thing. And like I said, I go once a night.
Yeah.
And I've never deviated since I was a teenager. So this has been going on for decades. And I just say, I know that this is something that happens, so I'm prepared for it. And you can get night, and there are now outlets that can be put on either the light switch plate or even one that plugs in close to the floor. And it's motion senses
Right.
Turn on a little light. So depending upon where you're living and what your situation is, there are some nice solutions that will not flood your room with light and then get it in your eyes, and
Right.
you're much easier to get back to sleep.
Thank you. And also you need to know you can buy light bulbs for your bedroom that don't have the damaging light. They're more expensive. I didn't put that in the presentation, but they do make lights that don't have the light that is dangerous for keeping you awake.
Right, and I think
you can adjust your phone for night light. You can adjust your computer. All of those, if you look at your phone, there's ways of reducing the glare that's dangerous at night. So thank you. And you can get the night lights that don't have the blue light in them. That's so disruptive.
Thanks again.
Oh, thank you. That was wonderful. You shared that.